Hello, and welcome to Materials Management Planning Grant Onboarding Recording. My name is Christina Miller, and I'm a Materials Management Planning Specialist with the state. With all 83 counties receiving a Materials Management Planning Grant, or MMP, we felt it would be most efficient to record an onboarding meeting rather than meeting individually with each county. This will allow the viewers to rewind and watch again if needed. And then if questions arise during the recording, please note them. And you'll be able to send them to us in an email later on, or we can schedule a call if needed um, in the future. At this point, if you're viewing this recording, we're going to assume that your county has an approved work program and that their grant contract has been fully executed. With that said, I just wanted to bring up the purpose of these materials management planning grants. They are ultimately to make sure that you have a materials management plan being developed and then in the future implementing that plan. And the funds specifically are outlined in the law for what they're able to be used for and in your Appendix A of the grant, which Maddie will go over briefly during her review. With that said, Maddie Corbin, if you can wave, is our grant analyst, and she's going to help with the administrative side of the grants. She is our section grant analyst and will be your primary contact for reimbursement requests and questions related to those. And then Amy Karana is our other materials management planning staff, and together we encompass the entire state. She is the and on the screen here, she is taking the eastern side of the states, as you can see in green, and I am the western side of the state in blue. And we're here really to ensure that counties are on the right track of developing and implementing your plan, making sure the planning process is being followed, answer overall planning questions, and to ensure that the other grant deliverables are met. Those grant deliverables are listed in your work program that's been approved. And then we will also be responsible for reviewing quarterly reports and reviewing reimbursement requests and making sure that they are consistent with the work program and budget items listed in your grant contract. With that said, we also have a team of recycling staff that is also important to mention. These are great resources as well. You can see this on your screen. They are divided by regions as well. And they are a great resource for you as they're familiar with your area. And they are the experts to work with each of the counties to help creating and implementing recycling goals, any implementation items, developing mechanisms, understanding best practices regarding recycling and organics management, and creating partnerships where appropriate. With that quick overview, I'd like to turn it over to Maddie. Like I said, she's going to go over our grant agreement boilerplate and an Appendix A. Thank you, Maddie.
All right, so as you can see on your screen, we have an example boilerplate in Appendix A that we've put together to review. The important things to note here on this first page are going to be the start date and end date of the project. The start date is going to be the date that it is executed by Eagle. That is going to be the date that it has been signed by our director after being signed by your contact. And then the end date, which for all of the MMP grants will be 12/7/2026. All of the important thing to note here is that all of the expenses should be falling between these two dates, except for a couple of pre-award expenses that are going to be allowed that we'll talk about a little bit later. Other pieces of information that are important on this page, you'll have your grant amount and the grantee contact information. So this is the person that we're going to be reaching out to with any questions regarding the project and the person we're going to be primarily in contact with. On the next page, we have our state contact information. This is going to be either Christina or Amy, depending on where the county is located. All contacts are going to go through this shared Eagle MMP mailbox so that nothing gets lost. And it'll have their phone number here as well, so you can reach out for any questions that you have for them. Down here in the changes section, an important thing to note here is that the budget line item revisions of less than 10% are going to be the only changes that are allowed without a formal written amendment. This means that you would just have to let your grant manager, either Christina or Amy, know if there's going to be a budget line revision of less than 10%. That's of the budget line, not of the total budget. So if you're moving funds between personnel and contractual or something similar like that, if it's less than 10%, we don't have to do a formal amendment. If there is anything more than 10%, we will have to submit a revised budget and do an amendment for that. We have the deliverables and reporting requirements. This has an outline of the reporting due dates. There's going to be quarterly progress reports that Amy and Christina will talk about later on in this recording. And then there is, let's see. Next, we'll talk about the subcontracts. For subcontracts, it's important to note that any contractors will be held to the same rules and regulations of the prime awardee here. So they should be held to all of the same things as outlined in this agreement. It's important to note that this funds cannot be used for any sort of lobbying. And then on the same note of subcontractors, it is important to check that your contractors are not debarred or suspended on sam.gov. It's okay if they are not registered on sam.gov. It is just important to note that if they have been debarred or suspended, they would be ineligible for working on the project. Audit and access to records. It's important to note that all records must be maintained for a minimum of 7 years after the final payment has been issued by the state in case there's an audit that comes through. We have the outlined information for cancellation and termination. If for any reason the project cannot go on, then the process for cancellation and termination are outlined here in your agreement. And then we get into the project or specific requirements, or Appendix A. The grant project scope is going to be the same for all of the counties. Basically, it is to ultimately develop that materials management plan. We have the detailed scope of work and timeline is outlined in that attachment C, the work program. And then we have the executed budget, which is attachment A. This has some information on what is allowable under the grant, the administrative costs preparing, implementing, and maintaining the materials management plan. And then we get into compensation. So this is related to those pre-award expenses that were mentioned earlier. This means that any expenses related to developing your notice of intent or your work program will be eligible as long as they were from January 8th, 2024 on until the grant start date. So these are going to be the only pre-award expenses that are going to be reimbursable. Any other expenses outside of the grant period will not be reimbursable. So everything else will have to fall between those two dates that are outlined on the front page. We will get into information on the grant reimbursement process and travel expenses and purchase of equipment after we go through some reporting information. We also have here some information on recapture if there was any issues throughout the project, if we fail to comply with the outlined tasks or anything like that. This is sort of what the process will look like if we need to recapture those funds. So now we're going to go over to Christina and Amy, who are going to talk about the reporting requirements.
Thanks, Manny. So we have a quarterly progress report form that will be available to you online. And so what we're going to do is just walk through what each of the areas are for you to complete. And this would be done on a quarterly basis. Those quarter dates are outlined in your grant contract as well. And they are the state fiscal year quarters. So your grantee is grantee is the county of which this contract is with. If you are part of a multi-county group, we'd also like you to list in that second line that group name. Your GG number is your grant given number, and that number you will have received when your grant contract has been executed, and that comes from our admin team. And so you'll want to identify there in that box there. The county grant manager is the person we're going to be working with to make sure all the grant stuff is being completed. And that was identified on your contract as well. The date submitted for this quarterly report and the reporting period. So those are pretty self-explanatory. The next section, number 1. So this is the status of your materials management plan development implementation and any items and tasks. And these are outlined in your actual work program that you got approved from us. So if you need to identify or make this into a table format or however you need to do to accomplish what's in your actual work program, you can identify those here. We have formed this template to be more ADA compliant. So you do not have to follow exactly what is in here, but just make sure that you have these items here. And this, so item 1 is what is in your work program, any tasks or items and comments and details to those. Section 2 is actually the plan format components, and those can be found in that plan format on our webpage. And these are the major planning components, because as I mentioned earlier, the objective of this grant is to make sure you have a plan that is approved, regardless of what your work program was approved for or your grant deliverables. So we still need to ensure that you are completing these items of your plan, even if it's not listed specifically as a grant deliverable in your contract. So in each of these, you're gonna, you do not have to only include these items. If there are additional items that you would like to list as under like generation, for example, you could list other types of generation items that you're going to include in your plan format when it's done, and the completion and any comments and details. But at a minimum, you have to include these items. We can go to item number 3. So in order for these plans to be developed, you are working with your Materials Management Planning Committee, or MMPC, and so we need to know the dates of those meetings, the agenda items of those meetings, and any actionable steps that have taken place. So we are assuming that these are done each quarter, that you'll be meeting probably 3 times, so we have those there. But if you are meeting more frequently, again, you can add additional lines as needed. Item 4 is if you have any planning committee appointment changes, just you'll notify us if that is the case, the representative, the name and which member that they're taking place of, and when that has taken place, if it hasn't already taken place. Number 5, we would like you to identify any challenges or proposed solutions that may have arisen during your planning committee meetings or outside of that. Even during the approval process, whatever it is, we'd like you to identify anything there. And then item 6 is we'd like a short description of the reimbursement request that you're submitting to us for this quarter, for that reporting period. The detailed items will be identified in your FSR, which Maddie will go through in more detail in a little bit. Number 7, there's any additional comments that you would like to share with us regarding your plan development process, your program deliverables, your scope of work deliverables that are in your grant contract. And then number 8, any budget changes, as Maddie mentioned, anything above 10% in a line item would need approval for that, and then we'd have to get an amendment. So if you want to seek those budget changes, that's where you would identify that. Number 9, are there any tasks that you'd like to bring to our attention that you would like assistance on, whether it's coming to meetings or to try to help accomplish certain things? This is where you would have the opportunity to do that. And number 10, the last item, is really to make sure that you have all the necessary items you need when you're submitting your quarterly report. So regardless if you're submitting reimbursement requests, you are required to give us a quarterly report. And so you would mark that box and then list any items in there. If you are requesting reimbursement, you'd have to ensure that the FSR would also be included. And then if you decide if you want to share anything else, you have the opportunity to do that, but you need to identify that in list form and underneath 10. The next section there is just to let you know this is for Eagle grant manager use only. We're going to put our comments in there. It will be blank when you submit it to us. And then just so everybody knows, if for some reason this form is not accessible to you and you need it to come to you in a different format, please reach out to us directly, or if you can scroll down to the accessibility email that's listed here. And that will be right on the form that Amy will go through here now, where you can find all this information online. So again, this is your quarterly report, and I'll turn it over to Amy. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Christina. So yeah, now that Christina has kind of shown you what that quarterly report looks like, I will show you how to submit it to us. So where you will start in order to submit it to us is to go to our webpage, and that is michigan.gov/EagleMMP. And you'll notice we have this new highlighted area right at the top of the page for MMP grants. So you can go ahead and click that, and it will open a whole new materials management planning grants page. I want to note that currently this is divided into 2 sections. First steps are things that you've already completed. Those are things like the grant application, the work program template, how much funding is available for each county. You've already completed all that. Where we're looking right now is these next steps. We will have the link to the quarterly progress report, the template that Christina just walked through. This is what we'll get to in a moment. We're also going to have an example reimbursement request that Maddie's going to go over shortly. And then this video will be up there as well. So when you're looking to submit your quarterly report or a reimbursement request, you're going to go ahead and click this link, and it will open a SurveyMonkey, which I'm sure you are all familiar with now because we've used it several times throughout this process. So this SurveyMonkey is pretty simple. It just asks a few questions. It asks for a few uploads. So the first thing you're going to do is select the county that you are looking to either get a reimbursement request for or submit the quarterly report. If you're in a multi-county group, go ahead and put that here. You'll choose who your grant manager is, and as Christina or Maddie showed before, that map, I'm the east side, Christina's the west side. That's also on our webpage. You can always get to it from there. And then it's going to ask which of the following you're completing today. So you can use this to submit a quarterly report only if you're just submitting the report and you don't have any reimbursement requests to go along with it. Or if you have just a reimbursement request, prior to whenever that quarterly report is due, you can go ahead and request that here as well. Commonly, I'm sure there will be a lot that's both are happening at once. So I want to note that, whichever one you select here, it will take you to only the pages that pertain to you. So if you're just doing a quarterly report, you're just going to see the quarterly report upload option. If you're just doing a reimbursement request, you're only going to see the reimbursement request upload option. If you do both, you'll see both. So I'll go ahead and do both so we can take a look at them. So go ahead and click next. Okay. So all it asks for is this one for the quarterly report. You'll just go ahead and upload it here. If you have any additional documentation like a report or anything that you want to include, you can go ahead and upload that here. Once you do that, go ahead and hit next. Same thing for the FSR or reimbursement request. You'll go ahead and upload that here. Any additional documentation you can also upload. Go ahead and do next. And then the last thing is just that standard electronic signature that we have on everything. So once you're done with that, you'll hit done. It'll take you to a screen that says thank you. At that point, we will have gotten an email. Christina or I in our Eagle MMP mailbox, we do receive emails when we get these submittals. So we will take a look at it and get that moving along. And at this time, we're going to turn it back to Maddie, and she's going to go ahead and walk through an example budget and reimbursement request.
All right, thank you, Amy. Okay, so looking at this is going to be those attachments at the bottom of your Appendix A. So just to real quickly go through, Attachment A is going to be your grant budget. So this is going to be your executed budget for the project. You'll notice that we have put these into a little bit more broad categories than what was submitted in the original work program. This gives us a little bit more flexibility as we're going through the life of the grant, just as things change. That just makes it a little bit more flexible if there's changes to what we're spending money on. So that 10% is by these line items, not by the budget that was submitted with your work program. And then attachment B is going to be the state of Michigan travel rates. Everyone will be expected to follow these travel rates when it comes to traveling for the project. If you had outlined certain per diems in your work program for meetings, those are going to be honored. But basically, these are our standard per diems for in-state, select cities. The select cities just have slightly higher rates. Those are going to be on the second page here. And then it has some mileage information, et cetera. So the most up-to-date ones of these will be on the DTMB website. If you ever have any questions about that, you can feel free to reach out to me about travel expenses. And then the final attachment is going to be your work program as it was submitted and approved to the MMP team. Next, I'm going to go through an example financial status report, or FSR. You'll recognize this first tab is going to be the budget tab that we just looked at. That's going to be your executed budget in your grant agreement. Then all of these other tabs are going to be your request tabs. So these request tabs are basically going to act as like a cover sheet for your reimbursement request. It'll summarize the expenses for the quarter, and it will calculate out any indirect or anything like that. So we ask that you only use these yellow squares here. Everything else is going to calculate automatically. So you would start by putting in your reporting period, which should be the quarter that you're submitting the reimbursement expenses for. Then you would select a category from this drop-down menu. The drop-down includes any of the categories that are in the budget. So salary and benefits, invoice number, generally just put either an invoice number, the name of the contractor or vendor, something that can tell me what documents I should be looking at when I'm making sure that everything is present there. So this could be just a payroll report. You would put the category number, which is outlined here in this progress report section and is also on your budget page. This just tells the formulas within the sheet where to add things to. And then, as you can see, once I put that number in, it automatically adds to the correct category here based on that number. So, for example, if we did contractual, we give an invoice number here, do the category number, and the amount here. So you can see that it shows you how much was expended during this period, how much has been spent to date, what the project budget is, and the balance, so what's left over in that category. And then it'll calculate down automatically. So for example, if we had an indirect budget here applied to that salary and benefits, that would calculate automatically here based on how much salary and benefits was expended for that period. This dark yellow square here is going to be the amount to expect in the reimbursement request after all is said and done. And then we just need a name and a signature here at the bottom. We do need a couple pieces of backup documentation to go along with that FSR. So I do have this example payment request that Amy and Christina both mentioned earlier. This is also going to be on that website. So this shows an example of basically what a fully filled out FSR would look like. So you can use this as guidance when you're going to fill yours out for the first time. And then it gives example documentation for each different type of expense here. So they are all color coded based on the category. And the general golden rule is that we need 2 pieces of documentation per expense that's been incurred. So the documentation for contractual supplies, materials, other direct costs, basically everything is going to be a receipt or invoice, something that is itemized, showing what was actually paid for, what work was performed, something like that. And then proof of payment, which is going to be something from the financial institution that you bank with. So that's generally going to be either front and back scans of a canceled check, or it will be a redacted bank statement showing the transaction has cleared the account. So looking through this document, we can see an example of a contractual services invoice. This shows the wages that were, how this was actually calculated. We see that it comes from the contractor themselves, seeing that the date falls within the grant period, et cetera. And then an example of the proof of payment in the form of a front and back of a canceled check. The things that we're looking for here is that the vendors are matching up, that the amounts are matching up, the dates are falling into the grant period, everything like that. Another example with an online payment or ACH. Here's an example of an equipment invoice. Again, we see that it comes from the vendor. We see what was actually paid for here. And then we have an example of a redacted bank statement showing the transaction highlighted here. And we can see that all of those things are matching up. For these bank statements, you can redact them within your level of comfort. We expect the account number to be redacted, but basically, if you didn't want to redact every single transaction on there and you just wanted to highlight the relevant transaction, that is totally fine as well. That is up to you. Another thing to mention on the equipment, which is called out in the Appendix A, is that any single piece of equipment over $10,000 will require a lien or UCC to be put on it. That is just a protection for the state funds to make sure that if a piece of equipment is purchased with grant funds, you can't just turn around and sell it or something similar. So basically, we hold that for 5 years or until that piece of equipment depreciates to less than $10,000. We do have an FAQ coming out about the liens and UCCs that we'll send out at a later date. The other type of expenses that I wanted to cover, because there are a lot of them in this program, is going to be just the personnel and fringe expenses. For that, we just need a simple internal payroll report showing the pay period, the name of the employee that worked on it, the number of hours, their hourly rate. And then if you have a fringe benefits report, you can provide the fringe benefits report. If you have an applicable fringe benefits rate that you were using, you can show us the rate and the calculation, how you got to the amount that you're requesting reimbursement for. If there isn't if you don't have the possibility to break things out by project within your payroll system, then we also would accept a simple spreadsheet just detailing those same pieces of information. So we're looking for the pay period, end date, employee, full name, the hours, the rate, and then if you had any applicable fringe benefits, you could note those down here as well. So those would be the most important pieces of documentation. Most questions come up as you're starting to put together your first report, so you can always feel free to reach out to me directly to ask any questions about what sort of documentation should be saved for reimbursement. And on that note, I will pass it back to Christina to close us out.
Hey, well, thank you, Maddie. So yeah, we have a team of people here willing to help you. Maddie is an expert in this, and then Amy and I are, really there, like I said, to help you make sure you're meeting your deliverables and answering questions as well. So definitely feel free to reach out to us. As Maddie has on the screen, we would like everyone to send us a confirmation email. Let us know that you've watched this. Send us any specific questions you may have based on the presentation regarding the grant contract and any deliverables, reimbursement, any of those type of things. And send us in the email, and then we will schedule meetings if needed. Otherwise, with that, thank you again and happy planning. Thanks, everyone.